The mine is collapsing! Get out! Now! Lydia's scream tore through the darkness as rocks exploded around them. The Duke stood frozen, staring at the tunnel where his brother had died. She grabbed his arm with both hands, her wedding ring cold against his skin. You don't get to die here. Not after I rode through a storm to drag you back. The mountain groaned. He looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time since their wedding night. And in that moment, everything changed. But I'm getting ahead of myself. If you want to know how a terrified bride became the only person who could save a man everyone called a monster, stay until the end. Hit that like button and tell me in the comments what city you're watching from. Because this story, it starts with a wedding that felt more like a funeral. The carriage lurched over another pothole, and Lydia Ashcroft pressed her forehead against the cold window glass, watching the English countryside dissolve into mist and rock. 3 days of travel. 3 days of her mother's voice echoing in her head. You should be grateful. Girls like us don't refuse dukes. Girls like us. Translation: poor gentry with a crumbling estate and debts that kept her father awake at night. Miss? The maid Clara touched her elbow gently. We're almost there. Lydia didn't answer. Almost where? Almost to the man she'd never met? Almost to the estate everyone in London whispered about? Almost to Duke Rowan Blackmore, the man whose name made drawing rooms go silent? She'd asked her father once, point blank. What do you know about him? Her father had looked away. He's wealthy. He's titled. And he's agreed to settle our debts. That's not what I asked. It's all that matters, Lydia. But it wasn't. Not when the modiste fitting her wedding dress had gone pale at the mention of his name. Not when her own mother couldn't meet her eyes at the ceremony, a ceremony the Duke hadn't even attended. He'd sent a proxy. A lawyer in black had stood beside her at the altar while she promised her life to a stranger. The carriage rounded a final bend, and Blackmore Hall rose from the moors like a jaw of broken teeth. Sweet Jesus, Clara whispered. Lydia understood the impulse to pray. The manor was massive, yes. 3 stories of gray stone with dozens of windows reflecting the dying light. But it wasn't the size that made her stomach drop. It was the wrongness of it. Half the windows were dark. The grounds looked untended, wild grass pushing up through gravel. And the whole estate sat beneath a sky so heavy with storm clouds it felt like being buried alive. The carriage stopped. For a long moment, Lydia couldn't move. This was it. This was where her life would happen now. Where she would grow old. Where she would... Miss, Claire's voice was small. Should we wait for someone to... The carriage door swung open. A man stood there, gaunt and gray-haired, wearing a butler's uniform that had seen better days. He didn't smile. Didn't speak. Just looked at her with eyes that said, I'm sorry for what you've walked into. I'm Lydia Ashcroft. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. I mean, Lydia Blackmore. The name tasted like ashes. Mrs. Blackmore. The butler gave a short bow. I'm Hastings. Welcome to Blackmore Hall. Welcome. Right. Lydia stepped down from the carriage, Clara scrambling after her with the small trunk that contained everything Lydia owned. The wind hit immediately, cold and sharp, carrying the smell of salt and something else, something like copper and old stone. The Duke? Lydia asked. Is aware of your arrival, madam. That wasn't an answer. Hastings led them through the main doors into an entrance hall that should have been grand. The bones were there. Marble floors, a massive staircase splitting in 2 directions, oil paintings of stern-faced ancestors. But the grandeur was rotting. Dust covered every surface. Several paintings hung crooked. One had a corner of its frame missing entirely. Clara made a small noise behind her. Your rooms are prepared, Hastings said, already moving toward the stairs. Dinner's at 8. The Duke will join you then. Lydia's heart hammered. Wait, I don't... But Hastings was already climbing, his footsteps echoing in the cavernous space. She had no choice but to follow, Clara clutching her elbow, like a drowning woman. The hallways twisted and turned. Lydia tried to memorize the route, but gave up after the 4th identical corridor. Everything was shadows and silence. No servants bustling, no voices, just the sound of their footsteps and the wind howling outside. Finally, Hastings stopped at a heavy wooden door. The Duchess's chambers. He pushed it open and stood aside. The room was nice. Better than nice, actually. Someone had made an effort here, fresh flowers on the vanity, clean linens on the massive four-poster bed, a fire crackling in the hearth. It was the first warm thing Lydia had seen since arriving. "Thank you," she managed. Hastings nodded. "Your maid's room adjoins through that door. I'll send someone to help you dress for dinner." Then he was gone, the door clicking shut with terrible finality. Clara immediately went to the window and yanked the curtains closed. "This place gives me the shivers, miss. All those empty rooms, did you see? Half the paintings have their eyes scratched out." "Clara, and the dust. When's the last time anyone cleaned? And why is there only one butler? A place this size should have a dozen servants at least, and— Clara, please." The maid stopped, wringing her hands. "Sorry, miss. This isn't right. None of this is right." No, it wasn't. Lydia sank onto the edge of the bed, still wearing her traveling cloak. Her hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against her thighs, willing them to stop. She'd known this wouldn't be a love match. She'd accepted that. But she'd thought, what? That there would at least be normalcy? A household that functioned? A husband who showed his face? "Help me dress," she said quietly. "Whatever happens at dinner, I won't face it looking like I've been dragged behind the carriage." Clara nodded, some of her starch returning. "Yes, miss. We'll show them proper quality, won't we?" Proper quality. As if that mattered here. But Lydia let Clara fuss over her anyway. Let her change Lydia into the nicest dinner dress they'd packed. A deep blue silk that brought out her eyes. Let her pin up Lydia's dark hair and pinch color into her cheeks. "There," Clara said, stepping back. "You look every inch a duchess." Lydia looked at herself in the tarnished mirror. She looked terrified. A knock at the door made them both jump. "Madam?" A woman's voice, thin and reedy. "I'm to escort you to dinner." Lydia opened the door to find a middle-aged woman in a housekeeper's black dress. Her face was sharp, all angles and suspicion. "I'm Mrs. Finn," the woman said. "Follow me, please." No warmth, no welcome. Just cold efficiency. Lydia glanced back at Clara, who mouthed, "Be careful." Then she stepped into the hallway and let Mrs. Finn lead her deeper into the labyrinth. They walked in silence, down the main stairs, through a gallery lined with more portraits, these ones intact but no less unsettling. All the faces looked the same, sharp, proud, unhappy. Finally, they reached a set of double doors. "The dining room," Mrs. Finn said. Then she turned and walked away without another word. Lydia stood there, her heart trying to climb out of her throat. Behind these doors was her husband, the man she'd legally bound herself to, the man whose name made people flinch. She pushed the doors open. The dining room was enormous. A table that could seat 30 ran down its center, set with silver and crystal that glittered in the candlelight. But only two places were set, one at the head, one to its right. And at the head of the table sat Duke Rowan Blackmore. Lydia's first thought was, he's younger than I expected. 30, maybe. 35 at most. Dark hair, longer than fashion dictated, falling past his collar. Strong features, sharp jaw, high cheekbones. He would have been handsome if not for the way he sat. Rigid, controlled, like a man holding himself together by force of will. He stood as she entered. "Mrs. Blackmore." His voice was low. Rough, like he didn't use it often. "Your Grace." Lydia curtsied, the formal gesture feeling absurd. They stared at each other. Up close she could see more, the shadows under his eyes, the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands gripped the back of his chair like he needed something to hold on to. "Sit," he said finally. "Please." Lydia moved to her seat. A phantom servant appeared from nowhere to pull out her chair. She sat, arranging her skirts, her mind racing. "Say something. Say anything. The house is impressive. Brilliant, Lydia. Truly inspired." Rowan sat as well, his movements precise. "It's old. Old can be beautiful. Old can be a prison." The bitterness in his voice made her look up sharply, but his face revealed nothing. Another servant appeared. Where were they all coming from? And began serving soup. Lydia watched the pale liquid fill her bowl and felt her appetite vanish. You had a pleasant journey, I trust? Rowan asked. The question was so stiff, so formal, it was almost funny. It was 3 days in a carriage, Lydia said. I'm not sure pleasant applies. Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, maybe. No, I suppose not. They ate in silence. Or rather, Rowan ate, mechanically, efficiently, while Lydia pushed food around her bowl. She couldn't stand it anymore. Why didn't you come to the wedding? Rowan's spoon stopped halfway to his mouth. He set it down carefully. I don't do well in London. That's not a reason. It's the only one you'll get. The bluntness should have offended her. Instead, it felt almost like honesty. I didn't want this either, she said quietly. If that helps. Now he did look at her, really looked. His eyes were gray, she realized. Storm cloud gray. I know, he said. Your father made that clear in his letters. He wrote to you? Extensively, explaining your reluctance, your family's circumstances, the debts. Heat flooded Lydia's face. He told you about the debts? That's why I agreed to the marriage, to settle them. The room tilted. So you bought me. I bought your family's freedom. You came with it. The casual cruelty of it stole her breath. Rowan must have seen something in her face because he set down his napkin. I didn't mean... He stopped, started again. This isn't... I'm not good at this. At what? Conversation? Basic human decency? At having someone here. The admission was so raw it punctured her anger. Lydia set down her own spoon. How long has it been since you've had company? 6 years. 6 years alone in this house? Yes. Why? Rowan stood abruptly, his chair scraping against stone. That's not a question I'll answer. He walked to the window, his back to her, hands clasped behind him in a white-knuckled grip. Lydia should have stayed quiet, should have let it drop. But anger and fear and 3 days of dread made her reckless. I'm your wife now, she said. Don't I deserve to know what I've married into? You've married into money and a title. That's all you need to know. That's not all I need to know. I need to know why everyone in London goes silent when they hear your name. I need to know why this house feels like a tomb. I need to know... Stop. The single word cracked through the air. Rowan turned. His face was a mask, but something blazed behind his eyes. You want to know? His voice was soft now, dangerous. Fine. 6 years ago, my younger brother died in a mining accident on this estate. My fiancée at the time, the woman I was weeks from marrying, ran away the night it happened. She couldn't bear to look at me. She sent a letter saying I reminded her of death itself. The household staff left one by one. No one wants to work for the Duke who lets people die. So yes, Mrs. Blackmore, this house is a tomb. You've married a ghost. Welcome to hell. The silence after his words was absolute. Lydia's throat was tight. I'm sorry. I didn't... Don't. He held up a hand. I don't want your pity. Then what do you want? The question hung in the air between them. Rowan looked at her for a long moment. Then he walked past her toward the door. Nothing, he said. I want nothing from you except that you stay out of my way. He left. Lydia sat alone at the enormous table, surrounded by flickering candles and cold soup, and felt the weight of her mistake settle over her shoulders like a stone. Well, hours later, Lydia lay in her massive bed, staring at the canopy above her head. Clara had tried to talk, but Lydia had sent her away. She needed to think. 6 years. 6 years of isolation, a dead brother, a fleeing fiancé. The pieces were there, but they didn't form a picture yet. What had happened in that mine? A soft knock made her sit up. Clara? No? Rowan's voice through the door froze her. May I come in? Lydia pulled the blankets up to her chin, suddenly very aware she was in her nightgown. Yes. The door opened. Rowan stepped inside, still fully dressed. He held a candle in one hand and looked uncertain. It was the first time she'd seen him look anything other than controlled. I shouldn't have spoken to you that way, he said without preamble. At dinner. It was cruel. Lydia blinked. You came to apologize? I came to... He trailed off, seeming to search for words. I came to give you a choice. A choice? He set the candle on her bedside table and took a step back, as if putting distance between them. This is a marriage on paper only. I won't ask for... He stopped, jaw tight with frustration. What I mean is, your rooms are yours. Your life is yours. I won't force myself on you, not tonight, not ever. You have my word. Lydia stared at him. This was her wedding night, and her husband was promising to leave her alone. Why? She whispered. Because I remember what it's like to be trapped, Rowan said simply. Because you didn't choose this. Because... He looked away. Because I'm not a monster, no matter what they say in London. Something shifted in Lydia's chest. Not attraction, not trust, but the faintest seed of doubt about the story she'd been told. Thank you, she said quietly. Rowan nodded. He picked up the candle. The house is yours to explore. Go anywhere except the West Wing. That's locked. Why is it locked? Because some doors are better left closed. He left before she could ask anything else. Lydia lay back down, her mind spinning. A husband who gave her freedom. A house with forbidden wings. A tragedy that still echoed through empty halls. Outside, the wind picked up, howling around the manor like a living thing. Somewhere in the distance, she heard what might have been thunder, or might have been something else entirely. Lydia closed her eyes. What have I gotten myself into? The question followed her into sleep, where she dreamed of collapsed minds and scratched-out eyes and a man standing at the edge of darkness, choosing to step forward instead of back. Morning came with weak gray light filtering through the curtains. Lydia woke to find Clara already bustling around the room, laying out clothes. Morning, miss. Your Grace. Oh, I don't know what to call you anymore. Lydia's fine when we're alone. Mrs. Finn would have my head if she heard that. Clara pulled out a simple day dress. She's a hard one, that woman. Barely said 2 words to me at breakfast. There was breakfast? Servants' breakfast, yes. Just me, Mrs. Finn, Hastings, and 2 maids who looked terrified of their own shadows. That's the whole staff, can you imagine? A place this size? Lydia sat up, pushing hair from her face. Did anyone mention the Duke? Only that he's already been out riding. Left before dawn, apparently. Mrs. Finn says he does that most mornings. Rides out to the moors and doesn't come back for hours. Out on the moors. Alone. Lydia dressed quickly and let Clara fix her hair. Then she stepped into the hallway, determined to understand this strange house in daylight. By day, Blackmore Hall was less terrifying and more sad. Rooms stood empty. Furniture sat draped in sheets. Portraits watched her pass with painted eyes that seemed to judge and find her wanting. She found a library with thousands of books gathering dust, a music room with a pianoforte that hadn't been tuned in years, a conservatory where dead plants filled the planters. Everything spoke of a life stopped mid-motion. She was studying a portrait in the main gallery, a young man with Rowan's features but a lighter expression, when Hastings appeared at her elbow like a ghost. Master Edmund, he said quietly. The late Duke's younger brother. Lydia looked at the painted face. He looks happy. He was. Before the accident? Hastings' expression closed. Yes, madam. What happened? Perhaps you should ask the Duke that question. I don't think he'd answer. Perhaps not. Hastings turned to go, then paused. Madam? The Duke is not a cruel man, he's a haunted one. There's a difference. Then he walked away, leaving Lydia alone with the portrait of a dead man who smiled like he didn't know what was coming. She spent the rest of the morning exploring, making mental maps, opening doors. Every room told the same story: abandonment, loneliness, a house waiting for something that would never come. Until she reached the West Wing. The door was locked, as Rowan had said, heavy oak bound with iron. But standing in front of it, Lydia felt something, a pull, like the house was holding its breath on the other side. She tried the handle, locked solid. I wouldn't. Lydia spun. One of the maids, young, barely 16, stood in the hallway, clutching a basket of linens. Wouldn't what? Go in there. Even if you could. That's where... The girl's eyes went wide. I've said too much already. Where what? Please. But the girl practically ran away, her footsteps echoing down the hall. Lydia looked back at the locked door. What was behind it? What was so terrible it had to be sealed away? She pressed her palm against the wood. Cold, solid, unyielding. Some doors are better left closed, Rowan had said. Maybe. Or maybe some doors needed to be opened before the secrets behind them poisoned everything. Lydia pulled her hand back and walked away. But she'd be back. She could feel it in her bones. Whatever was locked in that west wing held the key to understanding this house, to understanding her husband. And whether she liked it or not, understanding him had become necessary for survival. Because Lydia was beginning to realize something. Rowan Blackmore wasn't keeping her prisoner. He'd made himself one long before she arrived. The pattern established itself within days. Rowan rose before dawn, rode out alone, and returned only for meals, if he returned at all. Some nights, Lydia ate dinner in that enormous dining room with nothing but candles and silence for company. Other nights, he appeared like a ghost, sat at the head of the table, and spoke perhaps 10 words before retreating to wherever he spent his evenings. The locked west wing consumed her thoughts. You're thinking about it again, Clara said one afternoon, catching Lydia staring down the hallway that led to the forbidden door. I'm not. You are. You get this look, like you're trying to see through walls. Lydia turned away from the corridor. Don't you wonder what's in there? No, miss, and neither should you. Some things are locked away for good reason. But Clara didn't understand. Couldn't understand. She hadn't married a man who treated his own home like a mausoleum, who flinched when Lydia entered a room unexpectedly, who looked at her sometimes like she was a puzzle he couldn't solve. A week passed. Then 2. Lydia explored every unlocked corner of the estate. The stables held beautiful horses. At least something in this place was well maintained. The gardens were wild but not entirely dead. Someone was keeping the rose bushes from strangling themselves. And beyond the manicured grounds lay the moors, vast, windswept, brutal. She'd ventured out once, wrapped in her heaviest cloak. The land rolled away in shades of brown and gray, dotted with rocks and hardy grass. In the distance, she could see the dark mouth of something man-made cut into a hillside. That's the mine, Hastings had told her when she'd asked. Closed now, of course. Can I go there? His face had gone carefully blank. I wouldn't advise it, madam. Another place marked forbidden. Another piece of the puzzle locked away. She turned back toward the house that day to find Rowan sitting motionless on his horse at the crest of a hill, watching her. Even from a distance, she could feel the weight of his gaze. When she'd raised a hand in greeting, he'd wheeled his mount around and ridden away. 3 weeks into her marriage, Lydia was no closer to understanding her husband than she'd been the night she arrived. Then the dreams started. The first one came on a night when the wind was particularly vicious, rattling the windows in their frames. Lydia dreamed of the west wing door standing open and a voice calling from inside. Young, frightened, familiar though she'd never heard it before. Help me, please. Someone help me. She woke gasping, her nightgown damp with sweat. Just a dream, just the wind and her imagination. But the next night it came again. And the night after that, always the same voice, always calling from behind that locked door. On the 4th night, Lydia woke to find herself standing in the hallway outside her room, barefoot and shivering, with no memory of leaving her bed. Miss! Clara's whisper was sharp with alarm. The maid stood in her doorway, candle held high. What are you doing out here? Lydia looked down at her bare feet on the cold stone. I was dreaming. You were walking. I heard you pass my door. Clara hurried over, wrapping her shawl around Lydia's shoulders. You're freezing. Come on, back to bed. Lydia let herself be led back to her room, but sleep wouldn't come. She lay awake until dawn, listening to the wind and wondering if she was losing her mind. At breakfast, a lonely affair at a small table in the morning room, Mrs. Finn appeared with the usual tray of tea and toast. Mrs. Finn, Lydia said before the housekeeper could escape. How long have you worked here? The woman's spine stiffened. 12 years, madam. So you were here when the accident happened? I was. Will you tell me about it? Mrs. Finn's face could have been carved from granite. That's not my place, madam. I'm not asking as the Duchess. I'm asking as someone trying to understand this house. Then perhaps you should ask the Duke. He won't talk to me. Then perhaps there's nothing to tell. The housekeeper turned to leave, but Lydia stood, her chair scraping loudly. Stop lying to me, all of you. Everyone in this house acts like I'm standing on a grave, but no one will tell me whose. Mrs. Finn turned back slowly. Her eyes were hard. You want to know about the accident? Fine. Master Edmund, the Duke's younger brother, went into the mine 6 years ago to check the supports. Something happened, a collapse. By the time they dug him out, he was dead. The Duke blamed himself. His fiancée couldn't bear the grief and left. Half the staff followed her. Those of us who stayed learned to keep our heads down and our mouths shut. That's the story. Are you satisfied? No, Lydia said quietly. Why did Edmund go into the mine alone? Why did the Duke blame himself? What aren't you telling me? Mrs. Finn's jaw worked like she was chewing glass. The Duke ordered the mine closed after Edmund died. If you want more than that, you'll have to drag it out of him yourself. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have work to do. She left in a swirl of black skirts. Lydia sat back down, her tea gone cold. Master Edmund had died in the mine. Rowan blamed himself. But why? What had really happened in those tunnels? She needed answers, and she knew where to find them. That afternoon, while Rowan was out riding and Clara was occupied with mending, Lydia slipped down to the west wing. She'd brought a candle and a letter opener. She wasn't above picking a lock if she had to. But when she reached the heavy oak door, she found it already ajar. Her heart hammered. Had someone left it open? Or had it never been properly locked? She pushed it wider. The hinges shrieked. Beyond lay a corridor identical to the rest of the house, except for the dust. Thick layers of it coated everything. The floor, the walls, the paintings. No one had set foot here in years. Lydia stepped inside. The first room she tried was a bedroom. A man's bedroom, judging by the clothes still hanging in the wardrobe. She touched a jacket sleeve and dust puffed into the air. On the nightstand sat a book, its pages yellowed and brittle. A writing schedule from 6 years ago. Edmund's room. Preserved exactly as he'd left it. Her throat tightened. This wasn't just grief. This was a shrine. She moved deeper into the wing. More rooms, all frozen in time. A study with papers still scattered across the desk. A sitting room with chess pieces arranged mid-game. It was like the occupant had simply vanished and no one had dared to disturb what remained. The last room at the end of the corridor had a different door. Newer. Reinforced. Lydia tried the handle and found it locked. But through the keyhole, she could see light. Flickering, like candles. Someone had been in there recently. Looking for something? Lydia spun so fast she nearly dropped her candle. Rowan stood at the entrance to the wing, his face in shadow. But his voice was cold. Colder than she'd ever heard it. The door was open, she said, hating how her voice shook. No, it wasn't. It was. I swear. I locked that door every morning, personally. He stepped into the corridor, and the dim light caught his expression. Fury burned there, barely controlled. So either you're lying or you picked the lock. I didn't. Get out. Rowan, please, I just wanted to understand. Get out! The roar echoed through the abandoned wing. Lydia flinched, her candle flame guttering. They stared at each other across the dusty corridor. Rowan's chest heaved like he'd been running. His hands were clenched into fists at his sides. This is my home too, Lydia said, forcing the words out steady. You can't lock me away from half of it and expect me not to ask questions. I can do whatever I want. This is my house. It's our house. We're married, remember? A piece of paper doesn't give you the right to go digging through my past. Then tell me. Stop hiding behind locked doors and silence and just tell me what happened. Why? The word was bitter. So you can pity me? So you can look at me the way everyone else does? Like I'm broken? Like I'm dangerous? I don't think you're dangerous. Then you're a fool. The words hit like a slap. Lydia felt her eyes burn, but she refused to cry. Not here, not now. I think you're a coward, she said quietly. Rowan went very still. What did you say? I said you're a coward. You hide in this house, you lock away everything that hurts, and you expect everyone around you to walk on eggshells forever. Your brother died. That's tragic. But you're not honoring his memory by turning his room into a tomb, you're just punishing yourself. You don't know anything about it. Because you won't tell me. There's nothing to tell. Then why do you ride out to the mine every morning? Lydia demanded. I've seen you, from the windows. You go there and stand at the entrance like you're waiting for something. What are you waiting for, Rowan? What do you think you're going to find? His face went white. How long have you been watching me? How long have you been torturing yourself? The silence stretched between them, taut as a wire. Finally, Rowan spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. He was 22 years old. He had his whole life ahead of him, and I sent him into that mine knowing the supports were weak, knowing it wasn't safe. I sent him anyway because I needed the coal and he was expendable. My own brother. Expendable. Lydia's breath caught. You didn't... I killed him. The words were flat, final. I killed my brother for profit. So yes, Mrs. Blackmore, I hide in this house, because that's what monsters do. He turned and walked away before she could respond. Lydia stood alone in the abandoned wing, surrounded by dust and ghosts, and finally understood. Rowan wasn't haunted by Edmund's death. He was haunted by his own guilt. She found him an hour later in the stables, brushing his horse with mechanical precision. The animal stood patiently while Rowan worked, his movements jerky, controlled only by force of will. You should have stayed inside, he said without looking at her. Probably. Lydia leaned against the stable door. But I'm not very good at doing what I should. I noticed. They stood in silence, broken only by the sound of the brush against the horse's coat. Edmund volunteered to go into the mine, Lydia said finally. Didn't he? The brush stopped. What makes you say that? Because I've been reading his journals, the ones in his study. He was trying to prove something to you. Trying to show he could be useful, he went into that mine of his own free will. Rowan set down the brush. His hands trembled. You read his journals. I did. Those were private. Nothing in this house is private. Not anymore. Not if we're going to survive living in it. He finally looked at her. His eyes were red-rimmed. He wrote about the mine? He wrote about wanting to help you, about how you'd been working yourself to exhaustion, trying to keep the estate profitable after your father died, about how he wanted to prove he was more than just the spare heir. Lydia took a step closer. He wrote that he loved you, that checking the mine supports was his idea, that you tried to stop him. Rowan's face crumpled. I should have stopped him harder, should have ordered him not to go, should have what? Locked him in his room? He was a grown man making his own choices. He was my baby brother. I was supposed to protect him. You can't protect people from themselves. Rowan laughed, a broken sound. My fiancée said the same thing, right before she left. She said I was drowning in guilt for something I couldn't control. She was right, but knowing that doesn't make it stop. Lydia moved closer, carefully, like approaching a spooked animal. The room at the end of the wing, the one that's still locked. What's in there? His jaw tightened. Emma's things? My fiancée. I packed them up after she left, but I couldn't throw them away, couldn't give them to charity, so I locked them up instead. Maybe it's time to open that door. Maybe it's time you stop trying to fix me. The words stung, but Lydia held her ground. I'm not trying to fix you. I'm trying to live with you. There's a difference. Rowan picked up the brush again, turning back to his horse. You should go back inside. It's getting cold. It was a dismissal, clear as day, but Lydia had learned something today, had seen the man beneath the armor crack, just for a moment, had heard him say the words he'd been holding inside for 6 years. It was a start. She left him in the stables and walked back to the house through the gathering dusk. The wind had picked up again, carrying the smell of coming rain. Above, the sky was bruised purple and gray. At dinner that night, Rowan didn't appear. Lydia ate alone, as she had so many nights before. But this time felt different. This time, she understood the empty chair. After the meal, she returned to the west wing. The door stood open again. She was certain she'd closed it earlier, but it didn't matter now. She made her way to Edmund's study and carefully gathered his journals. 5 of them, leather-bound and filled with his neat handwriting. She carried them back to her own room and spent the rest of the night reading. Edmund Blackmore had been young, optimistic, desperate to prove himself. The journals painted a picture of a household in transition. A father recently dead, an older brother suddenly thrust into a dukedom he wasn't prepared for, minds that needed modernizing but money that was scarce, and Edmund determined to help. Convinced that if he could just demonstrate his competence, his worth, Rowan would see him as a partner instead of a burden. The final entry was dated the day before he died. Rowan tried again today to talk me out of inspecting the south shaft. He says the supports are questionable and we should hire an engineer, but engineers cost money we don't have, and I've been studying the diagrams. I know what to look for. Tomorrow I'll go down myself, mark the weak points, and we'll have a plan. He'll see. I can do this. Lydia closed the journal, her throat tight. Edmund had died trying to prove something, and Rowan had spent 6 years punishing himself for not stopping it. 2 people destroyed by one accident. One literally, one metaphorically. She was still awake when she heard footsteps in the hallway outside her room. Slow, hesitant. They stopped outside her door. A long pause. Then they retreated. Lydia stared at the door, her heart pounding. Rowan had come to her room, had stood outside, and then had walked away. What had he wanted? To apologize? To talk? To just not be alone? She should let it go. Should give him space. Instead, she grabbed her dressing gown and slipped into the hallway. Rowan was halfway down the corridor, a candle in his hand. He heard her footsteps and turned. They stood there, 2 ghosts in a haunted house. I was going to knock, he said quietly, but I didn't know what I'd say if you answered. Try the truth. He laughed that broken sound again. The truth is I don't sleep well, haven't in 6 years, and tonight I thought maybe if I wasn't alone. Lydia walked toward him. You're not alone. Yes, I am. That's the problem. That's always been the problem. Then stop being alone. Stop locking yourself in that study or riding out to the moors or wherever it is you disappear to. Stay here. Talk to me. I don't know how anymore. So we'll figure it out, together. Rowan looked at her like she'd said something in a foreign language, like the concept of together was so alien he couldn't process it. You don't have to save me, he said finally. Good, because I'm not trying to save you. I'm trying to save myself from dying of boredom in this enormous house with nothing but silence for company. A sound escaped him. It might have been a laugh, a real one. Come on, Lydia said, holding out her hand. You can't sleep. I can't sleep. Let's raid the kitchen and you can tell me about Edmund. The real Edmund, not the ghost you've been living with. Rowan stared at her outstretched hand for a long moment. Then, slowly, he took it. His fingers were cold, calloused from riding. They gripped hers like she might disappear if he let go. They walked together through the dark house to the kitchen, where they found bread and cheese and wine that was probably too expensive to drink at midnight. They sat at the servants' table. The big formal dining room felt wrong somehow, and Rowan talked. He told her about Edmund as a child. Fearless, always climbing things he shouldn't, jumping from heights that made their mother scream. About how Edmund had hero-worshipped Rowan growing up, following him everywhere, imitating everything he did. He wanted to be just like me, Rowan said, staring into his wine. That's the worst part. If he hadn't looked up to me so much, maybe he wouldn't have tried so hard to impress me. Maybe he'd still be alive. Or maybe he'd have done something else equally reckless, Lydia said. You read the journals. He had his own mind, his own will. He was 22. You were 26 when your father died and left you this entire estate. You think you had everything figured out? Rowan's mouth twitched. No. Neither did Edmund. You were both doing your best. They talked until the candles burned low, until Lydia's eyes grew heavy and Rowan's voice grew hoarse, until the wine bottle was empty and the bread was just crumbs. I should let you sleep, Rowan said, standing. Lydia stood too. Thank you for telling me. Thank you for asking. They walked back upstairs together. At Lydia's door, Rowan hesitated. The West Wing, he said. You can go there if you want. I'll unlock it properly, all of it. Are you sure? No, but I think maybe it's time. He left before she could respond, disappearing into the shadows at the end of the hall. Lydia went back to her room and finally slept. No dreams this time. No voices calling from behind locked doors. Just silence. The good kind. The next morning, she woke to find a key on her breakfast tray. Heavy iron, old-fashioned. A note was attached in Rowan's angular handwriting. For Emma's room. Do what you think is right. Lydia held the key in her palm, feeling its weight. Then she went to find Clara. I need your help, she told the maid. We're clearing out a room. Clara's eyes widened. Which room? The one that's been locked for 6 years. Together, they made their way to the west wing. The door at the end of the corridor opened easily with the key. Inside was exactly what Lydia had expected. Trunks of clothes, boxes of letters, a vanity covered in bottles of perfume, but also dust, stale air, the smell of things dying slowly. Where should we start? Clara asked. Lydia looked around the room. This wasn't just Emma's belongings. This was Rowan's past, packed away but never dealt with. We sort everything, she said. Clothes to charity, letters we box up properly and store in the library. Personal items, she picked up a silver hairbrush. Personal items we ask Rowan about. They worked all morning. Lydia read some of the letters. She probably shouldn't have, but she did anyway. They were love letters, beautiful and painful. Emma had loved Rowan, that much was clear, but the later letters showed cracks, worry about his isolation, frustration with his guilt. And finally, the last one. I can't watch you destroy yourself, Rowan. Every day you wake up punishing yourself for something you didn't do, and I can't fix you. I've tried, but you have to want to heal, and I don't think you do. I'm sorry. I can't stay. Lydia folded the letter carefully and set it aside. She'd give it to Rowan later. He should see it, should know that Emma hadn't left because she didn't love him. She'd left because loving him was killing her too. By afternoon, the room was half cleared. Lydia sent Clara to rest and kept working alone, sorting through boxes. She was elbow-deep in a trunk of dresses when she heard footsteps behind her. You actually did it. Rowan stood in the doorway, looking around the transformed room. His expression was unreadable. You gave me the key, Lydia said. I assumed you meant it. I did. I just didn't think you'd move this fast. No point waiting. Dust only gets thicker. He stepped inside, running his hand along the empty vanity. I proposed to her in this room. Did you know that? It used to be her sitting room when she visited. I didn't know. She said yes immediately, didn't even think about it, just yes. He smiled, sad and distant. I thought we'd be happy. You would have been, if Edmund hadn't died. Maybe. Or maybe we'd have found some other reason to fall apart. Emma was right about one thing. I'm very good at destroying what I love. Lydia stood, brushing dust from her dress. That's not true. Isn't it? Edmund's dead. Emma's gone. This whole estate is crumbling. Everything I touch turns to... Stop. Lydia crossed the room to stand in front of him. You want to wallow in guilt? Fine. But don't lie to yourself. Edmund's death was an accident. Emma left because she couldn't carry your grief and hers. And this estate is crumbling because you've been hiding from it for 6 years instead of running it. None of that makes you cursed. It just makes you human. Rowan looked at her, really looked at her, for a long moment. Then he said, I found something today. At the mine. Lydia's stomach dropped. What do you mean? I went out this morning like I always do, but this time I went inside, into the tunnels, and I found evidence of sabotage. The word hung between them like poison. Sabotage? Lydia whispered. Someone cut through the support beams, deliberately. I didn't see it before because I could never bring myself to go deep enough. But today I did, and... He pulled something from his pocket. A piece of wood, the cut marks still visible. This wasn't an accident. Someone wanted that mine to collapse. Lydia's mind raced. Who would... Why would... I don't know, but I'm going to find out. His face was hard now, determined. And when I do, they're going to pay for what they did to Edmund. Outside, thunder rumbled. The storm that had been building all day was finally breaking. Lydia looked at the piece of wood in Rowan's hand, at the rage burning in his eyes. and realized with cold certainty, this wasn't over. Whatever had killed Edmund 6 years ago was still out there, and now they'd just made themselves targets by digging too deep. The rain hammered against the windows as Rowan spread the evidence across his study desk. Pieces of cut wood, Edmund's journals, maps of the mine tunnels marked with his own notations from that morning's investigation. "You're sure it was deliberate?" Lydia asked, studying the jagged cuts in the support beam. "Those marks were made by a saw, not a natural break, not erosion." Rowan's finger traced the edge. "Someone went down there before Edmund did and weakened the supports just enough that any weight would bring them down." But why? What did Edmund ever do to anyone? "That's what I need to find out." He pulled out a ledger, flipping through pages of accounts. "I've been going through the estate records. The mine was profitable, very profitable. After Edmund died and I closed it, we lost our primary income source. Some people in the village blame me for the job losses." Lydia's stomach twisted. "You think someone from the village killed Edmund? Over jobs?" "I think someone wanted that mine to fail. Whether they meant to kill Edmund or just cause trouble." He slammed the ledger shut. "Either way, they succeeded." "Rowan," Lydia put her hand over his, "you can't go after them alone. If someone was willing to kill once, I'm not afraid." "Then you're an idiot." The words came out sharper than she'd intended. "You've spent 6 years blaming yourself for Edmund's death. Now you find out it was murder and you want to charge in like some kind of avenging angel? That's not bravery, that's suicide." Rowan pulled his hand away. "What would you have me do? Let them get away with it?" "No, I'd have you be smart about it. Gather more evidence, figure out who had motive, build a case before you accuse anyone. That could take months. Better months than ending up like Edmund." They stared at each other across the desk, the storm raging outside. Finally, Rowan exhaled. "You're right. I know you're right. But every day that passes, the trail gets colder. Whoever did this has had 6 years to cover their tracks. Then we start with who's still here, who worked at the mine, who lost the most when it closed." Lydia pulled the ledger toward her, scanning the names. "Hastings would know. He's been here longer than anyone." Rowan's jaw tightened. "Hastings has been loyal to this family for 30 years. I won't accuse him." "I'm not accusing him. I'm saying he might know who had reason to hate the Blackmores." A knock at the door interrupted them. Mrs. Finn entered without waiting for permission, her face drawn. "Your Grace, there are men from the village at the door. They're demanding to speak with you." Rowan and Lydia exchanged glances. "How many men?" Rowan asked. "A dozen, maybe more. They say it's about the mine." Lydia's blood went cold. "How do they know you were at the mine today?" "Someone must have seen me." Rowan was already moving toward the door. "Stay here." "Absolutely not." Lydia followed him into the hallway. "If there's a mob at our door, I'm not hiding in your study like a frightened child." "Lydia, don't." She caught his arm. "We're in this together, remember? You said it yourself last night." Something flickered in his eyes. Fear, maybe, or gratitude. He gave a short nod. They descended the main staircase to find Hastings at the front door, his elderly frame blocking the entrance. Through the windows, Lydia could see torches burning in the rain, their light casting grotesque shadows. "Let me through, old man," a voice bellowed from outside. "We got business with the Duke." Hastings didn't budge. "His Grace will see you when he's ready, Thomas Garrett. Not before." "We ain't asking permission." Rowan pushed past Hastings and threw open the door. The crowd fell silent. In the torchlight, Lydia could see maybe 15 men, all soaked from the rain, all holding tools, shovels, picks, hammers. Not quite weapons. Not quite not. At their front stood a massive man with a scarred face and hands like hams. Thomas Garrett, apparently. "Your Grace," Garrett's voice dripped with mockery. "Heard you been poking around the old mine. Thought we ought to remind you that mine's been sealed by your own order." "The mine is on my land," Rowan said coldly. "I'll go where I please. Aye, your land, your mine, your brother who died in it." Garrett took a step closer. "Funny thing, though, we heard you found something down there today. Something interesting." Lydia's heart hammered. How did he know? Rowan's face remained impassive. "I found evidence of criminal activity. If you know something about it, I suggest you speak now." A ripple went through the crowd. Murmurs, angry looks. "Criminal activity?" Garrett laughed, but it was a harsh sound. "That's rich coming from the man who sent his own brother to die in unsafe tunnels." Edmund's death was no accident. Rowan's voice cut through the rain like a blade. "Someone sabotaged those supports. Someone in this village murdered him." The murmurs turned to shouts. "You calling us murderers? After you took our livelihoods? You got no proof of nothing." Garrett held up a meaty hand and the crowd quieted. "See, Your Grace, that's where you're wrong. Edmund Blackmore was a good lad. Better than you ever were. We all knew it. And when he died checking those supports you were too coward to check yourself, it broke hearts all through this village." "Then help me find who killed him," Rowan said. "Killed him?" Garrett's face twisted. "You killed him. Sent him down there alone because you couldn't be bothered to do the dangerous work yourself. And then you shut the mine, put 36 families out of work, and locked yourself in this mausoleum feeling sorry for yourself." He spat on the ground. "You want someone to blame for Edmund's death? Look in a mirror." Lydia saw Rowan's hands clench into fists, saw the muscle jumping in his jaw. "Get off my property," he said quietly. "Or what? You'll have us arrested? Good luck finding a magistrate who'll side with you over the village." Garrett took another step forward. "We came to give you a warning, Your Grace. Stop digging in that mine. Stop asking questions. The past is dead. Let it stay buried." "Is that a threat?" "It's advice. Take it or don't. But if something were to happen to this big house, well, stone burns just like wood, don't it?" The crowd behind him murmured agreement. Lydia felt ice flood her veins. This wasn't just anger. This was organized, planned. "Leave," Rowan's voice was steel. "Now, before I do call the magistrate." Garrett smiled, showing broken teeth. "We're going. But remember what I said. Some doors are better left closed." He turned and the crowd followed, their torches bobbing away into the darkness. Hastings shut the door and threw the bolt. His hands were shaking. "Your Grace," he said quietly, "perhaps Mr. Garrett has a point. Perhaps it would be wiser to what?" Rowan turned on him. "To let my brother's killer walk free? To pretend I didn't see what I saw? To stay alive." Hastings met his gaze steadily. "That crowd wasn't here to talk. They were here to intimidate. And if you keep pushing, next time they won't stop at words." Rowan opened his mouth to argue, but Lydia cut him off. "Hastings is right. We need to be careful." She looked at her husband. "But we also need to know who we can trust. Hastings, how many of those men worked in the mine?" The butler's expression went carefully neutral. "Most of them. Thomas Garrett was the foreman." "The foreman?" Lydia's mind raced. So he would have known about any structural issues, would have been responsible for maintaining the supports. He would have reported problems to Master Edmund, yes. And did he? Report problems? Hastings looked uncomfortable. There were disagreements about costs. Mr. Garrett wanted new timbers brought in, expensive ones from Scotland. Master Edmund thought the local wood would suffice if properly treated. Rowan's face had gone pale. Edmund and Garrett argued about the mine supports? It wasn't an argument exactly, more a difference of professional opinion. Professional opinion? Rowan's laugh was bitter. And then Edmund died in a collapse caused by faulty supports. You don't think that's relevant? I think Mr. Garrett is a hard man, but not a murderer. You think? But you don't know. Hastings straightened. I know that making accusations without proof will get you killed, Your Grace. And begging your pardon, but I've already buried one son of this house. I'd rather not bury another. He left before Rowan could respond. Lydia waited until his footsteps faded before speaking. Garrett knew about the supports being weak. He knew, and he didn't stop Edmund from going down there. Or he made sure they'd fail. Rowan was pacing now, agitated. He was the foreman. He had access. He had knowledge. And if Edmund refused to buy the expensive timbers, maybe Garrett saw an opportunity to prove his point. Let the cheap wood fail. Teach the young master a lesson. A lesson that turned into murder. Whether he meant to kill Edmund or just scare him doesn't matter. the result is the same. Rowan stopped pacing, his face hard. I need to search Garrett's property. See if there's evidence, tools, records, anything that ties him to the sabotage. You can't do that alone. I have to. If I bring authorities, Garrett will know I'm coming. The whole village will close ranks. Lydia grabbed his arm. Then I'm coming with you. No. Yes, you need someone to watch your back, and before you argue, remember, I'm smaller, quieter, and less likely to be recognized in the village than you are. Rowan stared at her. You want to help me break into a potential murderer's home and search for evidence? Yes. That's insane. So is going alone. They stood in the dim hallway, rain still hammering against the windows, and Lydia saw the moment Rowan made his decision. Tomorrow night, he said, when the village is asleep, we go together, we search fast, and we leave before anyone knows we were there. Tomorrow night, Lydia agreed. She should have been terrified, should have been second-guessing every choice that led to this moment. Instead, she felt alive for the first time since arriving at Blackmore Hall. The next day crawled by. Lydia tried to act normal, ate breakfast, read in the library, walked the gardens despite the mud. But her mind was elsewhere, planning. What would they need? Dark clothes, a lantern, but shuttered, something to pick locks with if necessary. Clara noticed her distraction at lunch. You're quiet today, miss? Something wrong? No, just thinking. About last night? I heard shouting. Was there trouble? Lydia hesitated. Clara had been loyal, trustworthy, but this was dangerous. The less she knew, the safer she'd be. Just some villagers being unpleasant, nothing to worry about. Clara didn't look convinced, but she didn't push. That evening, Lydia dressed in her darkest day dress, a practical brown that would blend into shadows. She braided her hair tight and wrapped it under a cap. When she looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. Rowan was waiting in the stables, dressed in black, 2 horses already saddled. You're sure about this? He asked. Too late to back out now. They rode out into the night, keeping to the back roads that skirted the village. The moon was a sliver behind clouds, giving just enough light to see by, but not enough to be easily spotted. Garrett's cottage sat at the edge of the village, a squat stone building with a thatched roof. No light showed in the windows. They tied the horses in a copse of trees and approached on foot. I'll check the back, Rowan whispered. You watch the front. If anyone comes, whistle. Lydia nodded, her mouth dry. Rowan disappeared around the side of the cottage. Lydia crouched behind a fence, eyes scanning the dark street. Nothing moved. The whole village seemed asleep. Then she heard it, a soft scrape of wood on wood. A window opening. Rowan was inside. Lydia's heart hammered. Every second felt like an hour. What if someone saw him? What if Garrett came home early? What if... A light appeared in a neighboring cottage. Panic shot through her. Someone was awake, moving around, coming to the window. Lydia whistled, soft, urgent. The light in Garrett's cottage immediately went dark. She whistled again, more insistent. A shadow moved behind the neighboring cottage's window. An old woman, holding a candle, peering out into the night. Lydia pressed herself flat against the fence, praying the darkness would hide her. The woman stood there for what felt like an eternity. Then finally, she turned away. The light retreated into the cottage. Lydia waited, barely breathing. Rowan appeared beside her like a ghost, nearly making her scream. Anything? She hissed. No, place is clean, too clean. His face was grim. Either he's innocent or he knew we'd come looking. Or he's hidden the evidence somewhere else. The mine. Rowan's eyes widened. He'd hide it at the mine, where he knows I've forbidden anyone to go. We can't search the mine tonight. It's too dangerous. Tomorrow then. During the day when we can see. They mounted their horses and rode hard back to Blackmore Hall, adrenaline still singing through Lydia's veins. They'd found nothing, but the act of searching together, of taking action instead of waiting, it had changed something between them, forged something. Back at the manor, as they unsaddled the horses, Rowan caught her hand. Thank you, he said quietly, for coming with me, for not thinking I'm insane. Oh, I definitely think you're insane, Lydia said. I just happen to agree with you. His laugh was startled. real. When this is over, when we find who killed Edmund, I want to try to be better at this. He gestured vaguely between them. At us. Lydia squeezed his hand. One crisis at a time, Rowan. But she smiled, and he smiled back. For a moment, standing in the dim stables with mud on their clothes and conspiracy in their hearts, they were just two people trying to survive together. Then reality crashed back in. Tomorrow, we search the mine, Rowan said, and we find the truth, whatever it takes. Morning came too fast. Lydia woke to Clara shaking her shoulder, the maid's face pale with fear. Miss, you need to come, now! Lydia threw on her dressing gown and followed Clara downstairs to find Hastings in the entrance hall, holding a dead crow. No, not dead, killed, its neck wrung, a note tied to its leg. Rowan was already there, reading the note. His face was white. What does it say? Lydia demanded. He handed it to her without a word. Stop digging or the Duchess dies next. The crude letters seemed to crawl across the page. They know, Lydia whispered, about last night, about Garrett's cottage. How? Rowan's voice was steel. We were careful, we weren't seen. Someone saw something. Hastings set the crow down gently. Or someone told them you'd come. The implications hung heavy in the air. There was a traitor in Blackmore Hall. Rowan's jaw clenched. Mrs. Finn. The maids. You. Hastings. Who else has access to this house? Who could have known our plans? We didn't tell anyone our plans, Lydia pointed out. Then someone guessed, or followed us. Rowan turned to Hastings. I want this house locked down. No one in or out without my knowledge. No one. Your Grace, do it! Hastings bowed stiffly and left. Lydia picked up the note again, studying it. The handwriting was barely literate, rough, angry. This isn't Garrett, she said slowly. He's educated enough to write properly. This is someone else. Someone working with him. Or someone working alone. She looked at Rowan. What if we've been wrong? What if Garrett isn't behind this? Then who? I don't know, but whoever it is, they're watching us. They knew about last night. They know about the mine. They knew exactly how to threaten you. Through the Duchess. Through her. Rowan's face went dark. You're not going to the mine tomorrow. It's too dangerous. Like hell I'm not. Lydia, someone just threatened my life. You think I'm going to sit here and wait for them to make good on it? Her voice rose. No. We go to the mine. We find the evidence. We end this. And if you get killed? Then you'll have to learn to live with that guilt too. The words were cruel but necessary. But I'm not dying, Rowan. Neither are you. We're going to figure this out. They stared at each other, wills clashing. Finally, Rowan nodded. Together. Together. But as Lydia climbed the stairs back to her room, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into a trap. And somewhere in the house, someone was watching, waiting, planning their next move. The mine entrance yawned before them like a wound in the hillside. Rowan had brought lanterns, rope, and a pistol he'd loaded with shaking hands. Last chance to turn back, he said. Lydia adjusted her grip on her own lantern. Stop asking me that. They stepped into the darkness. The tunnel was narrow, the ceiling low enough that Rowan had to duck. Water dripped somewhere in the distance. The air smelled of earth and rot and old fear. Edmund's body was found about 100 yards in, Rowan said, his voice echoing strangely. Where the main shaft branches. They walked in silence, their lanterns throwing wild shadows on the rock walls. Lydia's breathing sounded too loud in her own ears. Then Rowan stopped. There. Ahead, the tunnel widened into a chamber, and there, scattered across the floor, were the remains of the collapse. Broken timbers, piles of rock, rusted tools abandoned in haste. And something else. Something that made Lydia's blood run cold. Fresh boot prints in the dust, leading deeper into the mine. Someone's been here, she whispered. Recently, Rowan drew the pistol. Stay behind me. They followed the prints deeper, the tunnel narrowing again. The prints led to a small side passage, one that didn't appear on any of Rowan's maps. And at the end of that passage, hidden behind a false wall of loose rock, was a cache. Saws, hammers, rope, and a journal. Rowan opened it with trembling hands. The entries were sparse: dates, times, plans. Cut the support beams in the south shaft. Make it look like natural rot. Edmund Blackmore inspects tomorrow. Everything is ready. If the young master dies, the Duke will close the mine. The estate will fail, and we can finally buy the land for what it's really worth. Lydia's vision swam. Buy the land? Who? Rowan flipped to the last page, and there, signed in bold script, was a name that made the world tilt. H. Blackmore. No, Rowan breathed. No, that's impossible. Your father? Lydia grabbed the journal. Your father planned this? He died before Edmund. This doesn't make sense. A sound echoed from the tunnel behind them. Footsteps. Multiple sets. They spun around. Thomas Garrett stood at the entrance to the chamber, flanked by 3 other men, all holding picks. Found what you were looking for, Your Grace? Garrett's smile was vicious. Good. Now you can die with the truth. Rowan raised the pistol. Stay back. That toy? Against 4 of us? You're a fool, Blackmore, just like your brother. You killed him, Rowan said, on my father's orders. Your father was a visionary. Saw the mines were dying, saw the estate would crumble under debt. So he made a deal. We collapse the mine, make it look like an accident, he collects the insurance money and sells the land to the coal consortium for a fortune. Everyone wins. Except Edmund. Edmund was never supposed to be there. Garrett's face twisted. The collapse was set for the next day, but the boy went down early without telling anyone. By the time we realized, he shrugged. Fortunes of war. And my father? Rowan's voice cracked. What happened to him? Guilt, I imagine. Killed himself 6 months after Edmund died. Left us holding the bag. No insurance payout, no sale, no nothing. Just a sealed mine and broken promises. Garrett stepped forward. But now you've come digging. Found the evidence. Can't let that leave this mine, can we? The men with him advanced. Rowan fired. The shot was deafening in the confined space. One of the men went down, screaming, clutching his leg. But Garrett lunged forward, grabbing for the pistol. Lydia didn't think. She swung her lantern with both hands, smashing it into Garrett's head. Glass shattered, oil sprayed, and then flame. The oil caught instantly, racing along the ground where it had splattered. Garrett screamed, beating at his burning coat. Run! Rowan grabbed Lydia's hand and they ran, stumbling over rocks, the flames spreading behind them. Behind them, the men shouted. The wounded one wailed. The tunnel groaned. The fire's destabilizing the supports, Rowan yelled. A crack split the air. Rocks began to fall. They ran faster, Lydia's lungs burning, her heart hammering. Behind them, she heard a massive crash, the chamber collapsing, burying Garrett and his men. Burying the evidence. They burst out of the mine entrance and kept running, not stopping until they'd reached the horses. Only then did Lydia dare to look back. Smoke poured from the mine entrance, and as they watched, the entire hillside shuddered and collapsed inward, sealing the tunnels forever. It's gone, Rowan said numbly. All of it. The evidence, the bodies, everything. Lydia was shaking so hard she could barely stand. Your father. He was behind all of it. My father was a murderer. Rowan's voice was hollow. And I spent 6 years blaming myself for his crime. They stood in the rain, when had it started raining, and watched the last of their answers disappear into the earth. What do we do now? Lydia whispered. Rowan looked at her. His face was streaked with soot and blood. His eyes were devastated, but his voice, when he spoke, was clear. We survive. They rode back to Blackmore Hall through sheets of rain, neither speaking. Lydia's hands were blistered from gripping the reins, her dress soaked through and clinging to her skin. Rowan rode ahead, his back rigid, and she couldn't tell if he was holding himself together or falling apart. The house loomed out of the storm like a ghost ship. Hastings met them at the door, his face draining of color when he saw their condition, covered in soot, smelling of smoke. Rowan's knuckles scraped raw. Your Grace, what happened? The mine collapsed, Rowan said flatly. Get Mrs. Finn, and bring everyone to the library. Everyone who works in this house. Now. Sir, I don't. Now, Hastings. The butler fled. Lydia followed Rowan to the library, where he immediately went to the liquor cabinet and poured 2 glasses of whiskey with shaking hands. He downed his in one swallow, poured another. Rowan. My father. His voice was raw. My father killed Edmund, planned it, orchestrated it, and I spent 6 years thinking it was my fault. Lydia took the glass he offered her. You didn't know. I should have known, should have seen the signs. The debts weren't as bad as he claimed. The insurance policy he took out on the mine 3 months before the collapse, the way he looked at me after Edmund died, like he was waiting for me to figure it out. Rowan laughed, bitter and broken. He killed himself because he couldn't live with what he'd done, and I was too blind to see it. You were grieving. I was useless. He slammed the glass down. Emma was right to leave. Who wants to stay with a man too stupid to see his own father was a murderer? Stop it, Lydia grabbed his arm. Your father was a monster. That's not your fault. None of this is your fault. Isn't it? I closed the mine, put the village out of work, made enemies who threatened your life. Everything I touch turns to, if you finish that sentence, I'm going to hit you. Lydia's voice was steel. You want to wallow in guilt? Fine, do it later. Right now we have a house full of servants who may or may not be working with the people who just tried to kill us. So pull yourself together and act like the Duke you're supposed to be. Rowan stared at her. Then, slowly, something shifted in his face. The devastation didn't disappear, but it hardened, focused. You're right, he said quietly. We need to know who we can trust. Footsteps in the hallway announced the arrival of the staff. Hastings entered first, followed by Mrs. Finn, Clara, and the 2 young maids whose names Lydia still hadn't learned. They arranged themselves in a nervous line, exchanging worried glances. Rowan studied each face in turn. The mine collapsed tonight, completely. It's sealed forever. Hastings' expression flickered. Relief, maybe. Mrs. Finn showed nothing. Thomas Garrett and 3 other men were inside when it happened, Rowan continued. They're dead. Now the reactions came. One of the young maids gasped. Mrs. Finn's hand went to her throat. Clara looked at Lydia with wide, frightened eyes. They died trying to kill us, Lydia said, because we found evidence that the Duke's father orchestrated Edmund Blackmore's death. The silence was absolute. Finally, Hastings spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. The old Duke. But he died of a heart condition. He killed himself, Rowan said, 6 months after Edmund died. Out of guilt. He pulled the journal from his coat. He'd grabbed it before they'd fled the mine. This is his handwriting, his plan. He was going to collapse the mine, collect the insurance, and sell the land. Edmund's death was an accident within the crime, but it was still murder. Mrs. Finn made a small, wounded sound. No, the old Duke was a good man. He wouldn't... Read it yourself. Rowan tossed her the journal. The housekeeper caught it with trembling hands. Her eyes scanned the pages, growing wider with each line. Then she sank into a chair, the journal falling from her lap. I didn't know, she whispered. All these years I thought... I blamed you, Your Grace. I thought you'd been careless, negligent. I never imagined. Who else knew? Rowan's voice was sharp. Garrett's dead. But he had allies. Someone in this house has been feeding information to the village. Someone knew we went to Garrett's cottage last night. Someone left that dead crow on our doorstep. Who was it? The staff looked at each other. No one spoke. Answer me! Rowan's shout made them all flinch. Someone in this room is a traitor. I want to know who. It was me. Everyone turned. One of the young maids, the one who'd warned Lydia away from the West Wing weeks ago, stepped forward, her face pale but determined. I told them, she said. Told Mr. Garrett when the Duke went to the mine. Told him when you searched his cottage. He's my uncle. Was my uncle. Her voice cracked. He raised me after my parents died. When he asked me to keep an eye on the Duke, I didn't know he was planning to... You got people killed, Rowan said coldly. I know. Tears streaked the girl's face. I know. And I'll turn myself over to the magistrate if you want. But I swear I didn't know what he was planning. I just thought he wanted to know if the Duke was going to reopen the mine, if there'd be jobs again. Lydia studied the girl. She couldn't be more than 17. Scared, grieving, stupid, yes, but not malicious. "What's your name?" she asked gently. "Alice, ma'am. Alice Garrett." "Alice, did your uncle ever talk about the old Duke, about what happened 6 years ago?" The girl nodded miserably. "He said the old Duke promised them all compensation when the mine closed. But then the Duke died, and there was no money, and everyone blamed the new Duke for breaking the promise." "Because they didn't know the old Duke was a criminal," Lydia said. She looked at Rowan. "They thought you were cheating them. That's why they were so angry." Rowan's jaw clenched. "And Garrett used that anger, manipulated them into thinking I was the enemy." "What do we do with her?" Hastings asked quietly. Rowan looked at Alice for a long moment. The girl stood there shaking, waiting for judgment. "You'll stay on," he said finally. "But you'll tell me everything Garrett ever said to you about the mine. Everything. And if I find out you're still lying, I'll have you arrested. Understood?" Alice nodded frantically. "Yes, Your Grace. Thank you, Your Grace." "Don't thank me. Thank the Duchess. She's the only reason I'm not throwing you out in the storm." The girl's eyes went to Lydia, red and grateful. "Go," Lydia said gently. "Get some rest. We'll talk more tomorrow." Alice fled. The other maid followed her, leaving just Hastings, Mrs. Finn, and Clara. "The journal," Rowan said. "I need you to read it, Hastings. All of it. You knew my father better than anyone. Tell me if there's anything in there that doesn't fit, any clue about who else might have been involved." Hastings picked up the journal with reverent care. "Your Grace, I'm sorry. I should have seen this. Should have known something was wrong." "We all should have." Rowan's voice was heavy. "But we were all too busy grieving to ask the right questions." Mrs. Finn stood, smoothing her skirts. "What will you tell the village about Mr. Garrett?" "The truth," Rowan said, "that he died in a mine collapse while trying to murder me, that my father was behind Edmund's death, that the people of this village were lied to and manipulated." "They won't believe you," Mrs. Finn warned, "not without proof." "The journal is proof." "The journal implicates your father. It doesn't prove Garrett was guilty of anything except following orders from a dead man." She was right. Lydia could see it in Rowan's face, the realization that truth and proof weren't the same thing. "Then we make them believe," Lydia said. Everyone looked at her. "The village thinks Rowan is a coward who let his brother die. We show them otherwise. We reopen the estate, hire workers, invest in the community, prove that the Duke they thought they knew doesn't exist." "With what money?" Rowan's laugh was hollow. "The estate is bankrupt. The mine is gone. We can barely afford to keep this house running. Then we sell things, that ridiculous gold service in the dining room, the paintings no one looks at, half the furniture gathering dust." Lydia was warming to the idea now. "This house is full of treasures rotting away while people in the village starve. We liquidate what we don't need, and we use it to rebuild." "You want me to sell my family's heritage?" "I want you to stop hiding behind your family's heritage and actually be the Duke these people need." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Mrs. Finn cleared her throat. "If I may, Your Grace, the Duchess has a point. Your father hoarded wealth while the village suffered. Perhaps it's time for a different approach." Hastings nodded slowly. "The people need to see you're not your father. Actions, not words." Rowan looked around the library, at the leather-bound books no one read, the portraits of ancestors who'd contributed nothing but debts and tragedy, the crystal decanters worth more than most families earned in a year. "All right," he said quietly. "We'll do it. Sell what we can. Hire who we must. Rebuild." "And the journal?" Lydia asked. Rowan took it from Hastings, weighing it in his hands. Then he walked to the fireplace and threw it in. "No!" Mrs. Finn lunged forward, but Rowan blocked her. "It's evidence," she protested, "of your father's crime." "It's evidence that my family is corrupt," Rowan said, watching the pages curl and blacken. "And I won't let that poison spread any further. The people who needed to know the truth are dead. The rest of the village deserves a fresh start. So do we." The journal burned to ash. Lydia watched it go and felt something shift in her chest. This was it. The moment Rowan stopped being haunted and started being alive. Get some rest, Rowan told the staff. Tomorrow we start cataloging what can be sold. Mrs. Finn, I'll need you to make a list of families in the village who lost income when the mine closed. We'll start there. Yes, Your Grace. They filed out, leaving Rowan and Lydia alone. For a moment neither spoke. Then Rowan crossed to where Lydia stood and pulled her into his arms. She went stiff with surprise, then slowly relaxed into the embrace. Thank you, he said into her hair, for not letting me give up, for being stronger than I deserved. You're welcome, Lydia said. Then, because she couldn't help herself, though you're getting soot all over my dress. His laugh was startled, real. He pulled back to look at her, and for the first time since she'd met him, his eyes were clear, focused. Here. I'm going to do better, he said. Be better. I don't know how yet, but I will. I know, Lydia said, because I'm going to help you, whether you like it or not. I'm starting to realize resistance is futile. Finally learning something, he smiled, and Lydia smiled back. And for a moment, standing in the ruins of his father's legacy, they were just two people finding their way through the dark. The next morning, Lydia woke to find Clara already laying out clothes. Not her usual dresses, but something simpler, more practical. Mrs. Finn sent word, Clara explained. We're going into the village today to speak with families. We are? You and the Duke, together. He says people need to see the Duchess cares about their troubles. Lydia's stomach twisted with nerves. The last time she'd seen villagers, they'd been holding torches and making threats. Now she was supposed to walk among them? But she dressed anyway, because backing down wasn't an option anymore. Rowan was waiting in the entrance hall, also dressed plainly. He'd shaved. She realized with a start that she'd never seen him clean-shaven before. It made him look younger, less burdened. Ready? He asked. No, but let's go anyway. They took a carriage into the village proper. Word of the mine collapse had spread. Of course it had. People stood in doorways, watching with hostile eyes as the ducal carriage passed. They hate us, Lydia murmured. They hate what they think we are, Rowan corrected. Let's prove them wrong. Their first stop was the widow of one of Garrett's men, the one Rowan had shot in the mine. The woman lived in a tiny cottage with 3 small children clinging to her skirts. She opened the door with red-rimmed eyes. Your Grace, come to gloat? No, Rowan said. I've come to apologize. The woman blinked. Apologize? Your husband died in the mine last night. I'm sorry for your loss. I'm also sorry that my family's choices left you in poverty these last 6 years. He held out a small purse. This won't bring him back, but it will keep your children fed while we work out something more permanent. The woman stared at the purse like it might bite her. I don't want your charity. It's not charity, it's restitution. Rowan's voice was firm. My father's crimes cost this village jobs and security. I can't undo that, but I can try to make amends. Will you let me? Slowly the woman took the purse. My husband, he didn't know. About the old Duke. Mr. Garrett told him they were just protecting the village from you reopening the mine. He thought he was doing right. I know, Rowan said gently, and I don't blame him for that. I blame myself for not coming out here sooner, for hiding when I should have been helping. Tears spilled down the woman's face. Thank you, Your Grace. Truly. They left her standing in the doorway, clutching the purse to her chest. The next stop was the blacksmith, a man named John who'd lost his livelihood when the mine closed and the need for tools dried up. Duke, he said warily when they entered his forge. Heard about the collapse. Heard Garrett's dead. He is, Rowan said, along with 3 others. I'm sorry it came to that. Are you? John's eyes were hard. Or are you just sorry they didn't succeed in killing you? I'm sorry that my father's lies turned this village against me. I'm sorry I didn't fight harder to clear my name. And I'm sorry you've been struggling all these years because I was too much of a coward to face you all. The blacksmith's hammer hung loose in his hand. That's a lot of apologizing. I have a lot to apologize for. Rowan pulled out a folded paper. I'm reopening the estate workshops. We'll need someone to manage the forge, repair tools, train apprentices. The pay is fair. The work is steady. Interested? John took the paper, reading slowly. His eyes widened. This is This is more than I made at the mine. Then you'll take it? Why? The question was blunt. Why now, after 6 years of silence? Rowan glanced at Lydia. She gave him a small nod of encouragement. Because my wife won't let me hide anymore, he said simply. And she's right. The village deserves better than a duke who locks himself away. So I'm trying to be better. John looked at Lydia, really looked at her for the first time. You did this? Got him out of that house? He got himself out, Lydia said. I just reminded him why it mattered. The blacksmith considered this. Then he stuck out his hand. You've got yourself a foreman, Your Grace. But if you go back to hiding, I'll come drag you out myself. Rowan shook his hand, something like relief crossing his face. Fair enough. They visited 6 more families that day. Not all of them were receptive. One man spat at Rowan's feet and slammed the door in his face. But others listened, took the offered help, agreed to meet again to discuss employment. By the time they returned to Blackmore Hall, Lydia was exhausted but oddly hopeful. That went better than expected, she said as they climbed down from the carriage. Only because you were there, Rowan said. They trust you. I don't know why, but they do. Because I'm not a Blackmore. I don't carry the family baggage. Yet, she laughed. Yet. That night at dinner, their first real meal together in weeks, Hastings brought news. The magistrate came while you were out, Your Grace, about the mine collapse. Rowan set down his fork. And? He ruled it an industrial accident. 4 men died due to structural instability in a condemned mine. No foul play suspected. Hastings' expression was carefully neutral. Though he did suggest that perhaps Your Grace should consider posting guards at the entrance to prevent future trespassing. In other words, he's covering it up. In other words, he's giving you a clean slate. Hastings poured more wine. The village will talk, of course, but without Garrett to fan the flames, the rumors will die down eventually. Lydia caught Rowan's eye across the table. He looked tired, but steady, like a man who'd been carrying a weight for years and had finally set it down. Good, Rowan said. Then we move forward. No looking back. No looking back, Lydia agreed. What? Over the following weeks, Blackmore Hall transformed. Rooms that had been sealed for years were opened and aired out. Furniture was inventoried, some kept, most sold. The formal dining room's gold service went to a collector in London for enough money to hire a dozen workers. Rowan threw himself into the work with focused intensity. He met with every family that had lost income when the mine closed. He hired men to repair the estate's tenant cottages. He invested in new farming equipment for the fields that had lain fallow. And slowly, grudgingly, the village began to change its opinion. Lydia worked alongside him. She organized the sales. She interviewed potential staff. She walked through the village with baskets of food and medicine, building relationships with the women who'd lost husbands or sons to the mine. Mrs. Finn softened first, then Hastings. Even Alice Garrett, once her initial terror wore off, became a valuable ally. She knew everyone in the village and could smooth introductions. One morning, 6 weeks after the collapse, Lydia woke to find Rowan already gone. But this time, instead of worry, she felt only curiosity. She found him in Edmund's old room, the one in the west wing. He was standing in front of the portrait she'd seen on her first exploration, the one of his brother smiling. "I'm taking it down," he said without turning. "Edmund deserves to be remembered where people can see him, not locked away in a tomb." "Where will you put it?" "The library, where I work now, so I can see him every day." Lydia moved to stand beside him. "He'd be proud of you, of what you're doing." "Maybe. Or maybe he'd think I'm 6 years too late." "Better late than never." Rowan smiled slightly. "Your philosophy for everything?" "It's worked so far." He turned to face her. "I couldn't have done this without you. You know that, right? You saved me." "We saved each other," Lydia corrected. "You gave me a home. I gave you a reason to live in it. Fair trade." "Is it?" He reached out, hesitating, then tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. The gesture was gentle, uncertain. "I know this wasn't the marriage you wanted, wasn't the life you imagined, but I'm grateful you're here, that you stayed." Lydia's heart beat faster. This was new territory. They'd been partners, allies, but this felt like something else. I'm grateful too, she said softly. For all of it, even the parts that were terrifying. Especially those parts? Especially those. They stood there, close enough to touch, not quite touching. The moment stretched, deepened. Then footsteps in the hallway broke the spell. Clara appeared, looking flustered. Begging your pardon, Your Grace, but there's a delegation from the village. They're asking to speak with you, both of you. Rowan and Lydia exchanged glances. How many people? Rowan asked. Maybe 20. They don't look angry, though. More nervous? They went down to the entrance hall to find exactly what Clara had described. A group of villagers standing uncertainly, twisting their caps in their hands. John the blacksmith stepped forward. Your Grace, Duchess, we've come to, well, we've been talking about the work you've been doing, the hiring, the improvements. And? Rowan's voice was cautious. And we think maybe we were wrong. About you. About what happened to Master Edmund. John looked around at the others, who nodded encouragement. We'd like to help, properly. Not just taking your money, but actually rebuilding, together. What are you proposing? Lydia asked. A council, another man said. Village representatives meeting with Your Grace monthly to discuss needs and projects. So we're partners in this, not just subjects. Rowan looked stunned. You want equal say in estate decisions? We want a voice, John said firmly. You've been fair these past weeks, but we've been burned before by dukes who make promises. No offense. None taken. So we're asking for structure, accountability, a real partnership. Lydia watched Rowan's face, saw the moment he made his decision. Yes, he said. Absolutely yes. We'll meet the first Monday of every month, here, in the library. You bring your concerns, I'll bring mine, and we'll figure it out together. A murmur went through the crowd. Surprise? Relief. Thank you, Your Grace, John said, extending his hand again. This time, when Rowan shook it, there were witnesses. A room full of them, all watching their duke choose partnership over power. After the delegation left, Lydia found herself laughing. What's funny? Rowan asked. You. 6 weeks ago, you could barely look at me. Now you're forming councils and shaking hands like some kind of people's duke. Is that bad? It's perfect. She took his hand, squeezing it. It's exactly what this place needed. He squeezed back, and this time he didn't let go. That night, at dinner, there were 4 place settings instead of 2. Hastings and Mrs. Finn joined them at the table, not as servants, but as equals, discussing the week's progress and next month's plans. The carpenter says the cottage roofs will be done by Sunday, Mrs. Finn reported, and the new looms arrived for the weaving house. Good, Rowan said. What about the school? Still negotiating with the church for the building, but I think we'll have it sorted soon. A school. They were building a school. Lydia looked around the table at these people who'd become her family, chosen family, forged in crisis, and she felt something she hadn't felt since leaving her parents' house. She felt home. To new beginnings, Rowan said, raising his glass. To new beginnings, they echoed. And in that moment, with candles flickering and rain pattering gently against the windows, Blackmore Hall finally stopped being a tomb. It became a home. Spring came to Blackmore Hall like a question finally answered. The gardens that had been wild tangles when Lydia arrived were now methodically cleared, new plantings going in under the supervision of a gardener Rowan had hired from the village, a woman named Margaret, whose husband had died in a different mine accident years before. She worked with quiet efficiency, transforming the grounds one bed at a time. Roses here, Margaret said, pointing to a section near the east wing. Your Grace mentioned the Duchess favors them. Lydia, standing nearby with a basket of cut flowers for the house, felt heat creep up her neck. He said that? Aye. Said you deserved something beautiful to look at that wasn't covered in dust. It was such a small thing, but it made Lydia's chest tight in a way she couldn't quite name. Inside, the transformation was even more pronounced. The entrance hall that had echoed with emptiness now bustled with activity. New staff, 10 in total, all from the village, moved through rooms that finally had purpose again. The formal dining room they'd stripped of its gold service was now a meeting space where Rowan held his monthly councils. The ballroom that hadn't seen dancers in a decade was being converted into a community hall where village children could learn to read and write. The school. Rowan's school. It had taken 3 months of negotiations, but the church had finally agreed to lease them the old rectory building. Classes would start in the fall, funded entirely by the estate. Unprecedented, the magistrate had called it when he'd visited to approve the plans. A duke funding education for common children. "They're not common," Rowan had said flatly. "They're my responsibility, and they deserve a chance." The magistrate had left, looking troubled, but he'd approved the papers. Now, 2 months later, carpenters were still working on the rectory, reinforcing floors, installing desks, building a small library. Lydia visited the site weekly, bringing food for the workers and checking on progress. On one such visit, she found Rowan already there, discussing window placements with the head carpenter. "The light needs to be good," he was saying. "Children can't learn if they're straining to see." "We'll put in larger windows on the south wall," the carpenter assured him, "double-paned so they don't freeze in winter." Rowan nodded, satisfied, then noticed Lydia. His face brightened in a way that still caught her off guard. "You brought food? Did you think I'd let you all starve?" She set down the basket. "There's bread, cheese, and some of Mrs. Finn's meat pies. Though I warn you, she's experimenting with spices again." The carpenter laughed. "Can't be worse than her attempt at curry last month." "That was a religious experience," another worker called from the rafters. "Just not a good one." They ate together, duke, duchess, and laborers, sitting on sawdust-covered floors and talking about everything and nothing. About whose daughter was getting married, about the new irrigation system for the northern fields, about whether they should build a bridge over the creek or just improve the ford. Normal conversation. Normal life. Afterward, as they walked back to the hall, Rowan took Lydia's hand. It was becoming a habit, that casual touch, his hand finding hers when they walked, his shoulder brushing hers when they reviewed ledgers together. Small intimacies that had crept into their partnership over the months. "The council meeting is tomorrow," he said. "Are you ready?" "As ready as I'll ever be." Lydia had agreed to present her proposal for a women's cooperative, a space where village women could learn trades like weaving and sewing, then sell their work through the estate's connections in London. It was ambitious, probably too ambitious, but Rowan had encouraged her to try. "They'll love it," he said with confidence she didn't feel. "They'll think I'm overstepping. I'm not from here. I don't—" "You're the Duchess. You absolutely are from here, and you've earned their respect 10 times over." Had she? Sometimes it still felt like she was playing a role, the girl from a failing estate pretending to belong in a place that had barely wanted her, but Rowan believed it. And slowly she was starting to believe it too. That night she couldn't sleep. Nerves about the presentation kept her awake, running through arguments and counter-arguments in her head. Finally, around midnight, she gave up and went downstairs to the library to review her notes one more time. The door was already open, firelight spilling into the hallway. Rowan sat at the desk, papers spread around him, Edmund's portrait now hanging on the wall behind him. He looked up when she entered. "Couldn't sleep either?" "Too much thinking." Lydia settled into the chair across from him. "What's your excuse?" "Same." He pushed aside the ledger he'd been studying. "Though I suspect my reasons are different from yours." "Oh?" He was quiet for a moment, fingers drumming against the desk. Then, "I received a letter today. From Emma." Lydia's breath caught. "Your former fiancé?" "Yes. She heard about the changes here, about the school, the cooperative, the council. She wrote to, I don't know, congratulate me? Apologize? Both?" He picked up the letter, staring at it like it might bite. "She said she was wrong to leave the way she did, that she should have stayed and fought alongside me instead of running. What do you think?" "I think she did what she needed to do, and I don't blame her for it." He set the letter down. "I was drowning back then, pulling everyone down with me. She saved herself. That took courage. Will you write back?" "I already did. Told her I was glad she found happiness, that I wished her well." His eyes found Lydia's. "And that I'd found something too, something I didn't expect." The words hung between them, weighted with meaning. Lydia's heart hammered. Rowan, I know this wasn't a real marriage. Not at first. We both know that. He stood, coming around the desk to where she sat. But somewhere between the mind collapse and the school plans and all those damn council meetings, it became real to me. You became real to me. Lydia couldn't breathe, couldn't think. I'm not asking you to love me, Rowan continued, his voice rough. I know that's not fair. But I need you to know that you're not just my Duchess. You're my partner, my friend, the person I trust most in this world. And if you'd let me, I'd like to try to make this real, properly real. You idiot, Lydia said, her voice cracking. It's already real. It's been real for months. His face transformed. Hope, relief, something deeper. Really? Really? She stood, closing the distance between them. You think I reorganized this entire estate out of duty? You think I fought tooth and nail with the church board over the school because I was bored? I thought you were just being stubborn. I am stubborn, but I'm also in love with you, you impossible man. The words escaped before she could second-guess them, but once they were out, she didn't want to take them back. Rowan's hands came up to frame her face, gentle and careful. Say it again. I love you. Again. I love you, Rowan Blackmore. Even when you're brooding, even when you're impossible, even when… He kissed her. It was nothing like she'd imagined, not smooth or practiced. A little awkward, actually, like neither of them quite remembered how this worked. But it was warm and real and theirs, and when they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. I love you too, Rowan said against her forehead, in case that wasn't clear. Lydia laughed, the sound shaky. It was moderately clear, yes. They stood there, wrapped around each other in the firelight, and Lydia felt the last piece of herself settle into place. This was home. Not the house, not the estate. This man, this moment, this feeling of being exactly where she belonged. We should probably sleep, Rowan murmured eventually. Big day tomorrow. Probably. Neither of them moved. Finally, Lydia pulled back. Come on, we can't present the cooperative proposal if we're dead on our feet. The cooperative proposal is brilliant. You could present it in your sleep. Flattery will get you everywhere. I'm counting on it. They climbed the stairs together, hands linked. At Lydia's door, Rowan hesitated. I could stay, he said carefully, if you wanted, or go to my own room, whatever you're comfortable with. Lydia pulled him inside. Stay. He did. The council meeting the next afternoon was packed. Word had spread that the Duchess would be presenting a proposal, and apparently half the village wanted to witness it. Lydia stood at the front of the converted dining room, her notes clutched in sweating hands, and looked out at 30 expectant faces. Right, she said, her voice only slightly shaky. Thank you all for coming. I know you're busy, so I'll be brief. She launched into her presentation, explaining the concept of the cooperative, a shared workspace where women could learn skilled trades, pool resources, and sell finished goods through the estate's London connections. She'd done the math, worked out the costs, identified potential instructors. It would be self-sustaining within 2 years, she concluded, and provide steady income for families who've struggled since the mine closed. Questions? Silence. Lydia's stomach dropped. They hated it. They thought she was overreaching, interfering, trying to… How many women can you accommodate? John, the blacksmith's wife, asked. Lydia blinked. Initially, 20. But we could expand if there's demand. And we'd own our own work, keep the profits? After covering material costs and the cooperative's overhead, yes. Everything else goes to the workers. More silence. Then a woman in the back stood. I can sew, she said quietly. My mother taught me before she died, but I've never had money for good fabric or anyone to sell to. This could work, if we do it right. I can teach weaving, another woman offered. Used to work the looms before they broke down. My daughter's good with embroidery. I know a merchant in London who buys lace. The room erupted in conversation, women talking over each other, ideas flying. Rowan caught Lydia's eye from where he sat at the side. He was grinning. It took 10 minutes to restore order. When the vote was called, the proposal passed unanimously. "When do we start?" someone asked. "Next month," Lydia said, still slightly dazed. "We'll need to convert the old carriage house and purchase equipment, but next month." The meeting dissolved into celebration. Women crowded around Lydia, asking questions, offering skills, planning. She fielded them all, her confidence growing with each exchange. Afterward, as people filed out, John approached with his wife. "Your Grace," he said to Lydia, "I wanted to say we were wrong about you when you first came. We thought you were just another London lady come to look down on us." "I'm not from London," Lydia said, "and I'm definitely not above anyone." "We know that now. You've proven it." His wife smiled. "You're one of us, a Blackmore through and through." Lydia felt tears prick her eyes. "Thank you. That means more than you know." After they left, she found Rowan waiting. "See?" he said. "Told you they'd love it." "You were right. Don't let it go to your head." "Too late." They walked back to the hall together through the spring sunshine, Lydia's mind already racing with next steps. Instructors to hire, equipment to purchase, a schedule to establish. "You're planning already," Rowan observed. "Someone has to." "I could help." "You have the school to worry about." "I can worry about two things at once. I'm talented that way." She laughed. "Fine. You can help, but I'm in charge." "Wouldn't dream of arguing." They spent the evening in the library, sketching out plans. What had started as a marriage of convenience had become a true partnership. In work, in life, in everything. Summer arrived hot and bright. The school was finished ahead of schedule. A beautiful stone building with those south-facing windows flooding the classrooms with light. They'd hired 2 teachers, one from the village, one from London, and enrolled 40 children for the fall term. The cooperative was thriving. 23 women now, working in the converted carriage house 6 days a week. Their first shipment of goods to London had sold out in a week. The second was already packed and ready. And Blackmore Hall itself had become something Lydia had never expected. A center of community. People came and went freely now. Mothers brought children to play in the gardens. Workers stopped by the kitchen for meals. The boundaries between Duke and village had blurred into something that felt almost like family. On the anniversary of the mine collapse, a year to the day since Lydia and Rowan had nearly died in those tunnels, they held a memorial service. Simple, respectful, no grand speeches, just a stone marker placed at the sealed entrance, listing the names of the men who'd died over the years, including Edmund and the 4 who'd perished in the final collapse. "They deserve to be remembered," Rowan said, standing before the marker. "All of them. Even the ones who tried to kill us. They were victims too. Of my father's greed, of desperation, of a system that failed them." The village stood silent, listening. "I can't undo the past," Rowan continued, "but I can promise you this. No one will be forgotten again. No death will go unmarked. No family will be abandoned. We're in this together, all of us." Someone started clapping, then another, then everyone. It wasn't forgiveness, not entirely, but it was acceptance. Recognition that the Duke had changed, that the estate had changed, that the future would be different from the past. Afterward, they walked back to the hall together, Rowan's arm around Lydia's shoulders. "You did good," she said. "We did good. We did. Fair enough." That night, lying in bed, their bed now, neither maintaining separate rooms anymore, Rowan said, "I've been thinking." "Dangerous." He swatted her shoulder gently. "Seriously, I've been thinking about Edmund, about what he'd want, and I think he'd want the mine site to be something useful, not just a memorial." "What did you have in mind?" "A park. Green space for the village, maybe some benches, a place for children to play." He turned to face her. "We could plant trees." Edmund loved trees, used to climb them constantly as a boy. Lydia smiled. "I think that's perfect." "You think he'd approve?" "I think he'd be proud of you, of everything you've done." Rowan was quiet for a moment, then, "I had a dream about him last night. First time in months. He was sitting under a tree, oak, I think, and he was reading. I asked him what he was reading, and he said the future. I asked what it looked like, and he smiled at me. Just smiled. Then I woke up. Sounds like approval to me. Yeah. Rowan pulled her closer. Yeah, it did. They fell asleep like that, tangled together, the windows open to let in the summer breeze. Fall brought the school's opening. 40 children marched into that building the first day, scrubbed and nervous and excited. Lydia and Rowan stood at the entrance, greeting each one. Your Grace! One small boy, maybe 6, looked up at Rowan with wide eyes. Is it true you're paying for all this? It's true, Rowan said, but you're the one doing the hard work. Learning isn't easy. I'm good at learning. My mom says I'm smart. Then I expect great things from you. The boy beamed and ran inside. Lydia watched him go, her throat tight. This was it. This was what they'd been building toward. Not just buildings or programs, but futures, possibilities. The first day passed in controlled chaos. By the end, 3 children had cried, 1 had gotten sick, and 2 had declared they were never coming back. But 37 had loved it. I'd call that a success, Rowan said that evening, reviewing the teacher's reports. 74% success rate, Lydia agreed. Could be worse. Could be much worse. The cooperative was doing even better. Their third shipment to London had included a commission from a prominent lady, 20 embroidered handkerchiefs for a wedding. The women had worked for weeks, producing pieces so beautiful that when the lady received them, she'd sent back payment double what was asked and a request for more. We're going to need more space, Margaret from the cooperative told Lydia during their weekly meeting. More women want to join. We're turning people away. I'll talk to the Duke, Lydia promised. We'll figure something out. That night, she and Rowan sat in the library, their nightly ritual now, and discussed expansion. We could convert the old stable building, Rowan suggested. It's not being used for much since we downsized the horses. That would double our capacity. Then let's do it. It was that simple, that easy, this partnership they'd built. Lydia set down her pen and looked at her husband, really looked at him. A year ago, he'd been a ghost haunting his own house. Now he was alive, engaged, building something real. What? He asked, noticing her stare. Nothing, just, I'm proud of you. Right back at you. We make a good team. The best. He reached across the desk and took her hand, thumb brushing over her knuckles. Such a small gesture, but it held everything: trust, partnership, love. I have something to tell you, Lydia said suddenly. Rowan's expression shifted to concern. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong, just, I saw the doctor in the village last week about the nausea I've been having. His face went pale. You're sick? Why didn't you tell me? We can get a specialist from London. Rowan, I'm pregnant. Silence. Complete, absolute silence. Then, there's a, yes, all of those things. Lydia couldn't help smiling at his expression. About 3 months along, the doctor thinks. Rowan stood so fast his chair fell over. He came around the desk and pulled her into his arms, holding her like she might break. A baby, he whispered. We're having a baby. We are. I'm going to be a father. You are. He pulled back to look at her, eyes shining. Are you happy about this? Terrified, Lydia admitted. But yes, very happy. Me too. Both of those things. They stood there processing. A baby. A child who would grow up in this house they'd rebuilt together. Who would never know the darkness that had filled these halls before. It's a new legacy, Rowan said quietly. Not the one my father left. Not Edmund's tragedy. Ours. Something good. Something good, Lydia agreed. Winter came, and with it, preparations. A nursery was set up in the room adjoining their bedroom, the one that had once been Emma's sitting room. Lydia supervised the work herself, picking soft colors and comfortable furniture. Clara had gotten married in the fall to one of the carpenters working on the school, but she still came to help most days, fussing over Lydia like a worried mother hen. You're doing too much, she scolded. The doctor said to rest. The doctor said to avoid heavy lifting. I'm not lifting anything. You're on your feet all day. Clara, I'm fine. Women have been having babies for thousands of years. I think I can manage." But she did rest more. Let others handle the day-to-day running of the cooperative, focused on the estate's larger plans instead of the smaller details. Rowan was impossible, hovering, worrying, making sure she had 3 blankets when she only needed 1. "You're going to drive me insane," she told him one evening. "Better insane than cold." "I'm not cold." "You could be." "I'm going to throw something at you." He grinned, completely unrepentant. But Lydia loved it, all of it, even the overbearing parts, because it came from a place of care, of love. The village celebrated with them. Gifts appeared on their doorstep, hand-knitted booties, carved wooden toys, blankets made by the women of the cooperative. Mrs. Finn started baking constantly, convinced Lydia needed to eat for 2. "It's one baby, not a village," Lydia protested, looking at the spread of food. "A growing baby," Mrs. Finn insisted. "Eat." Even Hastings softened, though he tried to hide it. Lydia caught him in the nursery once, examining the crib Rowan had commissioned. "It's sturdy," he said gruffly when he noticed her. "Well made." "It is." The young master would have approved of all this. The baby, the changes, everything. It was the first time Hastings had called Edmund anything other than Master Edmund in months. The informality felt like acceptance, like Edmund had finally become a memory instead of a ghost. "Thank you, Hastings," Lydia said softly. He nodded and left, but not before she saw him smile. Spring returned. The baby was due in early summer, and the whole estate seemed to hold its breath in anticipation. The park at the mine site was finished. 20 oak trees, for Edmund, who'd loved climbing, surrounded by benches and pathways. Children played there every afternoon now, their laughter echoing where screams had once filled the air. Rowan stood at the edge of the park one morning, watching the children, his hand resting on Lydia's very pregnant belly. "He would have loved this," he said. "He does love it," Lydia corrected, "wherever he is." "You think he's watching?" "I think he's at peace, which is the same thing." They stood there feeling the baby kick against Rowan's palm, watching new life bloom where death had once ruled. "I've been thinking about names," Rowan said. "If it's a boy." "Let me guess, Edmund." "Too obvious?" "Maybe, but fitting." Lydia covered his hand with hers. "And if it's a girl?" "I was thinking Lydia, after her mother, since her mother is the strongest person I know." "Absolutely not. One of me is plenty." He laughed. "Fair enough. We'll figure it out." They always did. The baby, a girl, as it turned out, was born on the longest day of summer, June 21st, the summer solstice, a day of light. She came into the world screaming, healthy and furious, with her father's dark hair and her mother's stubborn chin. They named her Eleanor, after neither family, after no tragedy, after nothing but themselves and the future they were building. Rowan held her with shaking hands, tears streaming down his face. "She's perfect. She's screaming. Perfectly." Lydia watched her husband cradle their daughter and felt her heart expand until it hurt. This man who'd been so broken a year ago, this man who'd learned to heal, to live, to love. "We did good," she said. "We did great." Eleanor kept screaming. "We might be in trouble," Rowan added. "Definitely in trouble." But they were grinning, both of them, exhausted and terrified and completely in love, with their daughter, with each other, with the life they'd built from ruins. 5 years later, Lydia stood in the same library where she'd first told Rowan about the pregnancy and looked at the ledgers with satisfaction. The estate was profitable, truly profitable. The cooperative had expanded 3 times and now employed 60 women. The school had added a second building to accommodate 100 children. The village council met monthly, as promised, and genuine partnerships had formed. And Eleanor, impossible, brilliant Eleanor, was starting her own education under the careful supervision of the school's teachers, who'd learned quickly that the Duke's daughter was as stubborn as her mother and as intense as her father. "She bit another student today," Rowan reported, coming into the library with their daughter in tow. Eleanor looked unrepentant. "He said girls couldn't learn Latin, so I proved him wrong." "By biting him?" He wouldn't listen to words. Lydia pressed her lips together to keep from laughing. Eleanor, we've talked about this. No biting. Oh, but Mama. No biting. Use your words. If that doesn't work, use facts. If that doesn't work, come get me or your father. And then can I bite him? No. Eleanor sighed dramatically. Being proper is exhausting. Get used to it, Rowan said. You're a duke's daughter. Propriety is part of the job. I didn't ask for this job. None of us did. We make it work anyway. Eleanor considered this, then nodded. Fine, but I'm not apologizing. He was wrong. Fair enough. Go wash up for dinner. She ran off, leaving Rowan and Lydia alone. She's going to be a handful, Rowan said. She already is. I love her so much it's terrifying. I know the feeling. He crossed to where Lydia stood and wrapped his arms around her from behind, chin resting on her shoulder. How are the numbers? Good. Better than good. We're ahead of projections for the year. Thanks to you. Thanks to us. Always us. They stood there, watching the sun set through the library windows, Eleanor's voice echoing from upstairs as she argued with Clara about something. Do you ever think about how it started? Rowan asked quietly. That first night when I gave you a choice? Sometimes. Why? Because I wonder what would have happened if you'd said no. If you demanded I leave you alone and I'd actually listened. Lydia turned in his arms to face him. We'd both be miserable. You'd still be haunting this house. I'd be trapped in a marriage to a ghost. Instead, we're here, happy, building something that matters. She touched his face. No regrets? Not a single one. Liar, you regret letting me reorganize your study. Okay, one regret. They kissed, familiar and easy. 5 years of marriage had smoothed the awkward edges, but the warmth remained, the certainty. Mama, Papa, dinner! Eleanor's voice shattered the moment. Coming, Lydia called back. They went to join their daughter, along with Hastings and Mrs. Finn and Clara and her husband, who ate with them most nights now. The formal dining room was formal only in name. Laughter and argument filled it more often than silence. This was family, chosen, built, fought for. After dinner, after Eleanor was tucked into bed with a story about a girl who conquered dragons with facts instead of swords, Rowan and Lydia walked through the house they'd transformed, past the entrance hall where Lydia had first arrived, terrified and alone, past the West Wing, now fully integrated into the house, no longer forbidden, past the library where they'd fallen in love over ledgers and late nights, out to the gardens where roses bloomed under the summer stars. Do you remember what I told you? Rowan asked. That first night, when I gave you a choice? You said this was a marriage on paper only, that you wouldn't force yourself on me, that I was free. I meant it, then, but I'm glad, so glad, that you chose differently. I chose you, Lydia said simply, and I'd choose you again, every time. They stood in the garden they'd built together, in the estate they'd saved together, under stars that had watched their entire journey, from darkness to light, from fear to love, from survival to thriving. The house that had been a tomb was now a home. The man who'd been a ghost was now a father. The woman who'd been a prisoner was now a partner. And the legacy they were building in the school, in the cooperative, in their daughter's fierce determination would outlast them both. To new beginnings, Rowan said, echoing that first toast years ago. To new beginnings, Lydia agreed. But this time they weren't toasting what might be. They were celebrating what was. A life, a love, a future they'd fought for and won, together, always together. Eleanor's voice drifted from her window above, singing herself to sleep with a song the village children had taught her, off-key, enthusiastic, perfect. Rowan laughed. She gets that from you. The singing or the stubbornness? Both. Fair. They stayed in the garden until the stars came out fully, talking about tomorrow's plans and next month's council meeting, and Eleanor's education, and 100 other small details that made up their life. It wasn't perfect. It never would be. There were still hard days and arguments and moments of doubt, but it was theirs, built from ruins, forged in fire, tempered by love. And when they finally went inside hand in hand, Blackmore Hall welcomed them home. Not the home Rowan had been born into, not the home Lydia had been delivered to, but the home they'd chosen, together, the only home that mattered.